Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel Trading Secrets. This channel is for entertainment purposes only. For those of you who do not know, my name is Ali. I have over 20 years experience teaching accounting, economics, business and law. Through this channel I'll be providing some stock analysis and a quick update on the $1 Million Challenge. So if anybody's not aware of this is a journey of investment of $1,000 to a return of $1 million over a period of 3 years using a strategic or compound return investing. So the objective is to try to get 201 trades, each an average return of 3.5%. It's not 201 consecutive trades, we do take into account losses. So for further details about how to join us for less than $9 a month, information is available in the description below. In today's video we're going to be looking at MMTLP and a significant update on the $8 per share class action against Next Bridge Hydrocarbons. We're also going to be looking at the biggest week of earnings so far, with predictions for all the big names calling this week, including Apple, Microsoft, Meta and much more. We're also going to be doing a quick review of the previous week's weekly watch list. So before we get started, let's have a look at what's happening in the market. So first of all, from Bloomberg, we can see that the S&P rally broadens beyond tech and the profit growth remains elusive. The Magnificent Seven firms are still providing the bulk of the earnings expansion. So if we have a look at a comparison of the Magnificent Seven, all are positive for 2024, including Tesla, but only a few are beating the S&P 500, and we can see they're way ahead of all of them is currently Nvidia. And if we see here from stock market today, the Dow Jones futures, we have Tesla, Nvidia currently potentially in the buy zones, and 5 huge tech earnings looming. So let's have a look at, I'm going to be sharing with you earnings. If we have a look at the screenshot here, again, I think this is the biggest week so far for earnings that we've had, and packed with a significant number of stocks. I am personally expecting a strong bounce in the markets this week. So we're going to have a review of some of these names shortly, but before we get started, let's have a look at what some of the calls were that we made in previous week's weekly watch list. So congratulations to everybody who got in some of these stocks shared before market trading on Monday. TVGN, that was up 61% on the week, one of the best calls. Save, again, we called with regard to news and momentum on that, up 36% on the week, with also a chance to get 53% return Tuesday to Wednesday. And another one that we've been watching for a while, XPON, up 22% Friday, also up 11.1% on the week, plus many more. So if you would like to get the next weekly watch list, it will be shared today, and details are in the description below. Before we look at MMTLP, I'm going to be sharing with you some predictions for some of the huge names calling earnings this week. So we're going to start by having a look at Amazon. Amazon is expected to beat earnings, and they're going to report on Thursday, October the 31st. So the consensus is that earnings estimate is $1.14 per share on revenue of $157.06 billion. And this represents a 9.8% year-on-year revenue growth. So Amazon is one of the stocks that I also personally hold, and I think it was a good buy price a few weeks ago. So again, congratulations to everybody on Amazon, currently up close to 7% on that already, and I do expect a jump in Amazon. So the next one we're going to be sharing with you, again a huge stock, is ticker symbol AMD, also known as Advanced Micro Devices. Expected to be earnings. It's going to be reporting on Tuesday, October the 29th, and the consensus estimate is 92 cents per share on revenue of $6.71 billion, and this represents a 15.7% year-on-year revenue growth. So hopefully good news also for AMD. So let's move on to have a look at Microsoft. Microsoft also one of my recent investments, ticker symbol MSFT, and I think it was also a good buy price. They're going to report earnings Wednesday, October the 30th, and the consensus earnings estimate is $3.08 per share on revenue of $64.43 billion, and this represents a very impressive 14% year-on-year revenue growth. So keep an eye out on Microsoft. And then I think the biggest one that everybody's going to be watching in the market is Apple. So Apple will be reporting on October 31st, 2024. So they have been a little bit inconsistent recently, and the consensus estimate is $1.54 per share on revenue of $94.48 billion. And this is going to potentially represent a 5.6% year-on-year revenue growth. So again, also expecting a beat for Apple. Meta is another one that most people will be watching. They're reporting Wednesday, October the 30th. Consensus estimate is $5.17 per share on revenue of $40.14 billion, and again a very impressive 17.6% year-on-year revenue growth. So keep an eye out on Meta. And I think the one that I'm interested in also is Google, ticker symbol GOOGL, another stock that I also hold. They're reporting on Tuesday, October the 29th. Consensus earnings estimate is $1.83 per share. And in terms of revenue, we're looking at, again, potential forecast of revenue of $86.23 billion. So a good potential beat there. And finally, the last one I'm going to be sharing with you is Intel, INTC. Also expected to beat estimates, but it has taken a hit quite recently. So we're looking at a potential loss of 2 cents per share on revenue of $13.01 billion. And this will be a decline of 8.1% year on year. But we are still expecting a beat because the consensus was a loss of 3 cents per share. So if it comes in at 1 cent per share, that should be overall good news. So let's now move on to MMTLP. Move on to have a look at an update for the $8 per share class action filed against Next Bridge Hydrocarbons, and also check out my previous video where we looked at the initial update and the initial filing for this. And we can also see here in the previous video that this was Todd Taggart amongst other people representing the plaintiffs versus Next Bridge Hydrocarbons. So there has been an update, and in this update what we're going to look at now is in terms of the response. So we can see here this is a brief in support of the defendant's motion to dismiss, and the defendant here is Next Bridge Hydrocarbons, and Todd Taggart individually is representing many other investors as well. So this is taking part in the United States District Court in Texas, Fort Worth Division. So let's have a look at the key updates. And in the introduction we can see here, remember most of these are responses from the company, and they are saying basically that the plaintiffs have concocted a securities claim that is inconsistent with the facts of the law and common sense. Plaintiff's primary complaint is that the dollar figures attributable to oil and gas properties on Nextbridge balance sheets in offering documents were not a true reflection of the property's value or worth. So as far as I'm concerned, the valuations were not inflated figures in the documents. So let's see how this plays out. And it goes on to say here, the offering price was $0 per share. So the plaintiffs did not pay anything for the Nextbridge stock, meaning their maximum damage was $0, and they can show no possible diminution in value, i.e. reduction in value. So that's the response from Nextbridge. And we can also see here they further on go on to say, in terms of the defendants, explaining who they are an oil and gas development company headquartered also in Fort Worth, Texas, and they date back to previously known as Torchlight Energy Resources. So the holder of the preferred shares were entitled to receive proceeds from the sale of Torchlight oil and gas assets, or if the sale was not completed by a certain date, i.e. spin-off equity holding of the assets. So that's what the company is saying is what was promised. However, the plaintiffs are basing their claims on allegedly misleading statements. The first one they're alleging is obviously that Nextbridge oil and gas properties were worth the figures on the balance sheet. The second one is they were alleging that the registration statement misstated that Nextbridge and the audit committee's ability to present accurate financial statements. And finally, they were alleging that the registration statement did not disclose sufficient information. So those are the allegations. So this is what Nextbridge is fighting. And in section 1 here, they say here that the plaintiffs lack the standing to bring their claims, and they must plead, amongst other things, that they have suffered an injury that can be redressed by a favourable judicial decision. And from the previous video, remember they were looking at an ask of around about $8 per share as a talking point, and the plaintiffs have not even pleaded facts suggesting an injury. So that's the response from Nextbridge, and it goes on to say here that the statute thus requires the plaintiffs to plead a certain kind of injury, and they do not allege that plaintiff share value has declined. We know obviously Nextbridge is a private company now, and they say here before the spin-off, plaintiffs owned Meta preferred stock, and there can be no injury. So in other words, they never paid for the Next Bridge Hydrocarbons. They did not buy MMTLP. You could say they were holders of MMTLP. So reasonable investors understood that Next Bridge Hydrocarbons operations were largely dependent on the continued viability of the leases, and the viability of the leases was not guaranteed, and we have seen that recently, especially with the university lands not renewing the lease, which was not good news in terms of the Oro Grande assets. And we know that the company is also filing that, and that was covered in the previous video. And they say here, any valuation would be an inactionable opinion statement, and reasonable investors understand that assessing oil and natural gas reserves before a well is developed is not fact. So in other words, they are suggesting it would be speculative. And they say that Nextbridge said throughout the registration statement that oil and natural gas reserve estimates were necessarily inexact and involved matters of subjective engineering judgment. Nextbridge also stated that its estimates were based on various assumptions, including those prescribed by the SEC. And reserve estimates for wells with limited or no production history are less reliable than those based on actual production. So that's what the company is saying, and obviously the wells in the Oro Grande assets are now gone. And section B, they also say that the registration statement did not materially misrepresent the quality of future audit committee. And we can also see in the next section here, they say, as for Mr. McCabe, the plaintiffs allege that they're a significant shareholder of Nextbridge, but it was actually Meta Materials that held 100% of Nextbridge equity before the spin-off, and not Mr. McCabe. So that's what the company is saying. And just before the conclusion here, they say the spin-off was subject to approval by the Meta board in its sole and absolute discretion, i.e. including George Palikaros, and the allegedly misleading financial statements were derived from the consolidated financial statements and all accounting records of Meta. So in other words, they're saying, well, Next Bridge Hydrocarbons had no power over this. It was purely in the hands of Meta, and we know that they are very, very close now to becoming officially bankrupt. So then that will be an argument that will not be able to be pursued. So in terms of the conclusion, defendants believe that oral arguments would be helpful to the court's consideration of the motion. So it looks like Nextbridge want to fight this face-to-face, and time permitting, the deference to the court's busy docket would respectfully request an oral hearing on this motion once fully briefed, and the defendants respectfully request the court grant this motion and dismiss the plaintiff's claim against them with prejudice. So that's the response on this $8 per share asked by the plaintiffs. And we can see this is also signed and dated by David Drez. So we'll wait for another update on this. And finally, thank you very much for watching. Please stay tuned.